Thank you so much to you, to Joraya, to the entire team in your organization, Women for Success, for inviting me. I really appreciate this opportunity. And so, briefly about me, my name is Dipika Srashta. I am from Nepal. Nepal is a small country between India and China. So I came to the US in the year 2014, and then before coming to the US, I was working for an international non-charity, international non-profit organization called BBC Media Action, which is based in more than 20 countries all across the world. So I was doing more of communications work, meaning like radio program production and training journalists about effective communications. So I was doing those sorts of work in Nepal. And then when I came to the US in 2014, initially I thought, it would be easier for me with the rich experience that I have back home to land in the same sector of job in the US market. So I tried applying a number of jobs, but with no success. I would never hear back from any organizations. I was tired of that and all. And I also had a dream to do my second master's degree in the US. I already had my master's degree back home in Nepal, but I wanted to gain an international degree from New York as well, just to enrich my knowledge and to enhance my knowledge and broaden my friend circle and build that kind of professional relation or networking relation with professors and basically to broaden my possibility in terms of career and prospect. So in 2017, I started my master's degree in international affairs at Baruch College in the City University of New York, in New York City. And along with that, what I did was in the year 2018, I and my husband, we started producing a weekly audio and video podcast. So the main idea of this podcast, the reason we started this podcast was like learning from our own struggle of being immigrants, being newly arriving immigrants, and then going through that struggle of going through that struggle of having difficulty of being able to make that career transition after your migration to the US. That is what kind of inspired me and my husband to do an audio video podcast where we could invite professionals from different immigrant communities to talk about their own career transition process. So we had guests. So we started we started producing this podcast, and in the podcast, we invited guests from immigrant communities who had come to the US from all over the world. And then they would not only share their initial days of struggles when they were new in the US, but then they would also share the practical actions and the practical steps they took, the challenges they faced, and the practical actions they took in order to overcome those career-related challenges that they faced when they were new in the country. So basically in the podcast became a platform where they could share about all of these, their life and career-related challenges. And the objective of the podcast is to present these stories of our guests to the newly arriving immigrants who could listen to these guests and then get inspired, get motivated, and then continue working on their passion and never give up and continue working on fulfilling their dream career in the US. And one beautiful part about the podcast, I would say, is most of our guests who we have interviewed, they have been so generous and kind to kindly share their personal email address, and also they most of them they invite our audience to reach out to them by LinkedIn or by through their personal email address, and they are willing to offer career guidance to our audience who reaches out to them. So this is the biggest asset of our podcast, that I would say that any of the audience can benefit from by listening to our podcast. And then, so at this point, let me take a moment and share the screen. And this is where I would like to, briefly walk you through the podcast, like in case you are wondering how it looks like, where can you find the podcast. Okay, so this image of me and my husband, Yuko, can you see the screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, okay, so everybody can see the screen. Okay, great. So this image of me and my husband, this is the thumbnail of our podcast. This is how the thumbnail looks like, and you can and the name of the podcast is At the End of the Day. So you can find this podcast on different
Okay. Did you draw this image?
No, just through the effect.
Somebody.
No, just through my husband, just through the effect. Oh, it was a real picture, and he just did some effect. Yeah. And so you can find this podcast, just type podcast at the end of the day, and you can find the podcast on iTunes, on Spotify, on YouTube, or any of your favorite podcast application. And all these episodes that we have done so far have also been archived on the official website of the podcast, which is www.podcastattheendoftheday.com. I also would like to, give you a quick look at the website. Yep. Okay. So this is how the website looks like. This guest who you can see right now, she is from China, and she works for World Education Services. She is one of our guests of the podcast. So I'm gonna go to the home page and just give you a quick preview of the kinds of topics that we discuss in the podcast. And we have been really glad to have guests who have very inspiring and amazing stories from different walks of life. Like each of these stories that they have is really motivating and inspiring. And then as a producer of this podcast, my objective is, if an audience, after listening to any of the episodes of our podcast, if an audience smiles with a hope that, okay, I should continue chasing my dream, I should continue working on my dream, then that's the success of the podcast. That's what I would say we have achieved. Like, for example, like on episode 95, we interviewed this guest. She is an immigrant from Yemen. So basically, if any of you, want to get access to the kinds of topics that we have discussed in the podcast, if you're wondering what kind of topics we have discussed, would be like, for example, well, on this screen, if you see here, this episode that we released on June 7th is where we interviewed Momo Botran, who is from, I forgot the name of the country. He is from one of the countries in Africa, and he talks about how he made his journey in the United Nations, which was his dream job. He, as a Black man, he had his classmates, he had his friends who used to tell him, you would make a good school teacher. You should not aim high to get into a job like the UN. It's beyond what is possible. But then, he was like, okay, nobody else has the right or the decision to decide what I want to do in my life. So he continued chasing his dream. He continued working on it. And today he works in the United Nations. And so that was an episode about his story. Likewise, there have been a couple of episodes where we talked about how, in order to land your foot in a desired career or in a desired sector, you could start with an unpaid internship or a paid internship, or you could start by offering yourself as a volunteer to the organization, and gradually you would build connections, network, and then you would win the trust of the people who can see that you really have the capability to work, and you are a person of words, and they whoever gave you the opportunity to volunteer or to do the internship might be your future professional referee when you apply for that dream job. Or you never know, you might end up getting a job in that organization where you had just begun volunteering a few months ago or a few years ago. So basically, we talk about different ways on how you can, enter and land your dream career. But then through each of these interviews with guests, most of them emphasize the fact that overnight success is not possible. You should not give up and continue working on it, because overnight success is not happening. And then never be afraid to reach out to people and ask for help, because out of let's say if you reach out to 10 people, you don't hear back from 8, you will still hear back from 2 people, and those 2 people might guide you a long way. So always, be positive, and then continue working, continue reaching out to people, and continue enhancing your skills and knowledge. So that's about the podcast. That's all about the podcast, I think, that I want to share. So far we have done 110 episodes of this podcast at the end of the day. And currently we are taking a seasonal break. We just finished season 1 of the podcast with 110 episodes. So right now we are taking season break for a few months, and then we plan to be back with the podcast. And currently, what we are also offering is, because of our podcasting experience for the past 2.5 years, if anybody wants to, if anybody is thinking of starting a podcast and is looking for someone who can guide them with the initial questions like what, hows, and whens, and all of those things, just feel free to reach out to us, me and my husband. My husband is a journalist. So, we will be more than happy to get in touch, build the connection, and then guide anyone in with what we know on how to start a podcast. So you can,
wow,
you can just,
very,
thank
wow,
you.
very generous. That's like
Amazing.
giving out the top secret. Like you're gonna help the rivals.
Yep. Yeah. So
Wow.
our email address is Anuj, ANUZ as in zebra, anujDipika@gmail.com, as you can see on the screen. And you can just, email us, and yeah, we will be happy to share what we know. And yeah, that's all about the podcast, I guess. And then I guess this is the next slide is going, slide is going to be my last slide for the presentation, which is, aside from the podcasting. So podcasting is basically my own personal passion project that, I and my husband have been doing. And professionally, what I'm doing right now is I'm working as a case manager and advocate at this nonprofit organization called Arab American Family Support Center. This organization has been running for the last 25 years, and it is based in, its main office is based in Brooklyn, but we also work in partnership with the mayor's office in all the five boroughs. So we are based in all the 5 family justice centers in New York City. So at the Arab American Family Support Center, most of the programs at this organization are catered towards underserved immigrant population in New York City. And out of its many programs, the program I am in is called Anti-Violence Program. So this is a flyer of this program, Anti-Violence Program. And about the services that we offer, it lists, like, as you can see, these are the different kinds of services that we offer, which is like, basically we use the term case management. And I'm pretty much sure that all of you are familiar with what case management is. And sometimes case management, the meaning of case management might differ, personally as well. Well, if you do not happen to be familiar with case management, then personally, from my experience, what I would say is, when we say we provide case management services, it is we interact with clients who come to us. We assess their needs and situations. And then based on the kinds of needs they have, we connect them to the organizations that can provide them with those services. For example, in my case, um, so clients come to meet me through Manhattan Family Justice Center. And most of my clients are survivors of domestic violence and survivors of intimate partner violence. So I talk to them, I see what kind of needs they have, and based on their needs, if they are in need of legal assistance to file for an order of protection, I would help them. I would, give them an appointment with an attorney, family attorney, so that first they legally get the understanding of what an order of protection is, what they are getting their feet into when they file for one. And if they are mentally prepared to file for order of protection, then I will draft the petition for order of protection, and I will submit the petition to the family court in Manhattan and make sure that they have an order of protection against the abuser and they can stay safe. Likewise, if there is a need where a client is having issues with child custody or divorce cases, then I will see if I can connect the client with divorce attorneys or immigration attorneys or family attorneys who could provide the service. And likewise, if a client is in need of counseling services for himself or herself or for her child who in some ways had witnessed a domestic violence case, a domestic violence situations at home in the past, then I would be connecting the client with those organizations who provide counseling services for the client and the child. And at Arab American Family Support Center, the anti-violence program team comprises of 9 staff members. I'm talking about the anti-violence program team. Overall, Arab American Family Support Center is now a really huge organization. It has many staff. But talking about the anti-violence program team, the team that I am in, we are a team of eight staff, and then we speak. All of us are multilingual, so that gives us a plus point, which is if there is a client who I cannot understand and who's not comfortable with using the phone interpretation service, I can ask for help from my colleague who speaks the same language as the client does. So in general, these are the services that we are offering. Ever since the pandemic started, one new thing that we have been doing is, if you notice this helpline hours, we have introduced a helpline number. If there is a client with any kind of needs related to domestic violence or intimate partner violence or any other kinds of needs, then they can dial this number, the hotline number, which is 800-980-6114. And we operate Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. and then Saturday and Sunday, 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. So when the clients call this number, it's us who receive the phone directly, and we talk to the client and we connect the client with the right resource. So that's what we have been doing. And thank you so much for listening to me. At Arab American Family Support Center, we have partnerships with a number of organizations. So like, for example, in the example that you just gave, where is you want to refer a client with immigration needs, you can refer the client to me. Or if for some reason I'm not available, you can have the client call that hotline number and then have the client tell that her needs are immigration related. She doesn't have to speak English. The client does not have to be Arabic. The client can be of any language. And then if you send the referral to our organization, we can do the intake with the client and then send the referral to of the client to the immigration organization, to the immigration team that can help the client.
I was curious to know the difference in crisis intervention and case management. I understand is when you're following your client and addressing needs. Crisis intervention to me seems a little bit fuzzier and trickier and obviously contextual. So I was just curious how you handle that, or is it just too personal to even discuss?
Based on the cases, definitely might be situations where it gets too personal, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
For when it comes to crisis intervention, I would say this most of the time applies when there is a high risk client, and generally we are always doing crisis, like crisis intervention. That is, like, again, I would say for these words, there is a professional definition, but then personally, based on what you have, based on how you have been, practicing and how you have been experiencing the work, I think these definitions differs from person to person, and how you handle also differs from person to person. So for me, when I say crisis intervention, I would understand it as assessing, first trying to understand where the client is in terms of her situation, like how escalated her DV or intimate partner violence situation is, whether it is safe or not for the client to be spending the night today at her home. So it involves safety planning around what she could do. Is there a friend close by who she could visit and spend the night? Or if required, then you equip her with information about domestic violence hotline number, and you give the client with Path Nova shelter information, so that if there is a need, then she can walk to the shelter, up in the Bronx. And it also involves making plan around when she should be calling the police if she fears for some kind of safety. And then if the client, now again, depending upon the situation, if the client has a criminal order of protection, then, and if she feels the need, then we work with the Safe Horizon for changing the lock, and changing the lock in her apartment, or we work with the NYPD to install the ATS, which is alternate to shelter, the button, so that she can press in her apartment, and that would alarm the police and let the police know that she is in some kind of danger. Wow, and the police would show up in her apartment. So yeah, so these are the ingredients, I would say, that comprises crisis intervention in my definition.
I see. So it sounds like the safety plan is really integral to setting up before you get to a situation that's immediate. So is that something that is part of case management, is creating a safety plan, just as process of what you do with the client? Yeah.
Yes, Darren. Yeah, you're right. So even when we say so we generally say we do case management services, but then the safety planning, the crisis intervention, and referrals for the appropriate referrals for the client, all of these come under the service that we provide, and it is very critical that we do these talks with each and every client.
Yeah. Beautiful. And only one other question. I don't know what OVS compensation is.
Oh yeah, sure. So OVS stands for Office of Victim Services. So New York, thanks for asking me that. So New York State has a program which is OVS, or Office for Victim Services. And if there is anyone who has gone through the domestic violence situation or intimate partner violence situations, or any kind of situations where the injuries happen to the person without his fault, and then there has been injuries that requires treatment and cost, plus there has been damage to essential stuff, like, let's say, cell phone or your glasses or your laptop and computer. If there has been damage to your essential materials, then we can file a claim with the Office of Victim Services and provide those necessary documents backed by the police report and order of protection. And then the OVS does its investigation, and then if approved, if they are satisfied with the investigation, they will compensate for the expenses.
Beautiful. Thank you. That's so good to know.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Thanks. Yeah, I totally skipped that. Thank you so much.